Imagine getting convicted of a crime, paying the required fines, and then the government says, "We're also taking your $40,000 SUV." Can the government take property that is worth far more than the maximum fine for your offense? That was the question in Timbs versus Indiana, decided by the U.S. Supreme Court in 2019. Tyson Timbs purchased a Land Rover LR2 for about $42,000 using money he received from his father's life insurance policy. Later, Timbs became involved in selling a small amount of heroin to undercover police officers. He was arrested and eventually pleaded guilty to drug-related charges. Under Indiana law, the maximum financial penalty for his crime was $10,000. But Indiana wanted something else, too. The state tried to seize Timbs's Land Rover because he had used the vehicle to transport drugs. Welcome to Once Upon a Case, because the law isn't just for lawyers, it's for everyone. This type of government seizure is known as civil asset forfeiture. Timbs argued that taking a vehicle worth roughly 4 times the maximum fine for his crime was excessive. He relied on the Eighth Amendment, which says that the government cannot impose excessive fines. But there was an important legal question. The Eighth Amendment originally restricted the federal government. Did the excessive fines clause also apply to state and local governments, like the state of Indiana? The case eventually reached the U.S. Supreme Court, and in a unanimous decision, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Tyson Timbs. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg wrote the court's opinion. The court held that the Eighth Amendment's protection against excessive fines is a fundamental right, and therefore applies to the states through the 14th Amendment. In other words, states and local governments cannot escape the Constitution's prohibition against excessive fines simply because they are not the federal government. However, there is an important detail. The Supreme Court did not make the final decision about whether taking Timbs's Land Rover was actually excessive. Instead, it sent the case back to the Indiana courts to apply the constitutional rule. Indiana courts later determined that forfeiting the Land Rover would be grossly disproportionate to Timbs's offense. So, who won? Tyson Timbs won. The Supreme Court established that the excessive fines clause applies to state and local governments, including cases involving civil asset forfeiture. The lesson from Timbs versus Indiana is simple. The government may have the power to fine you or seize property connected to a crime, but that power has limits. The punishment cannot become so extreme that it violates the Constitution. Because even when the government has a legitimate reason to punish someone, the Eighth Amendment still protects against excessive financial penalties. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, watch this case next.